spoilerios about spoilerios. Let's roll.
Hello, I'm Sean Baker. Welcome to another edition of Evolution of the Arm. So it is Monday the 14th, and episode 14 aired last night. I watched it twice in a row. My favorite episode of the series, if you remove 8's surrealistic madness from the equation. I loved it. So let's get right into it. We start with Gordon calling the Twin Peaks Sheriff Station. I thought for sure this was Gordon calling to let them know that he's en route. But no, it's him returning Frank's call about the diary pages and the two Coopers. I found myself wondering if this, we've been talking about how this was shot and then David Lynch edited it at his leisure and placed things out of sequence. So was this directly after Hawk found the diary pages and showed them to Frank? Because that was a while ago. Is there a reason for that? Is there time displacement going on? There's a lot of talk about that, or parallel alternate dimensions. Gordon doesn't mention that they're en route, which we know they're en route because of the coordinates that Diane saw on Ruth Davenport's arm and then typed into her phone 2 episodes ago. We saw that said Twin Peaks, so we know that they're going there. But does Gordon not tell the sheriff about this because maybe he has reason not to trust anybody in Twin Peaks? Maybe he knows something that no one else does, or at least that we don't. So from there we go to Albert and Agent Preston, and we get a lot more about the origins of the Blue Rose. Albert tells her about the first Blue Rose case, the case from which the division gets its name. 1975, and it's a young Gordon Cole and Philip Jeffries investigating a murder in Olympia, Washington. They are outside a motel, hear a gunshot, kick in the door, and find one Lois Duffy bleeding on the floor and another Lois Duffy holding a revolver. Now, we would think that this is a case of a doppelganger, perhaps the first recorded, or at least for the FBI. As the injured Lois Duffy is dying, she says, "I am like the Blue Rose." Now, when asked to interpret this, Agent Preston says, Blue Rose doesn't occur in nature. So she goes on to say, so maybe this other Lois Duffy was conjured, her words, or a tulpa. Now, tulpa is a concept from Tibetan philosophy, and it's a thought form. So it's a thought given form. You see it in chaos magic. It can be called a servitor, and this is, you're basically programming your desire or your will to take shape and to do your bidding, so to speak. It's interesting that Agent Preston goes to these two things because it tells me right away that she knows her way around the occult, as I'm sure they all do, but she was just brought into the Blue Rose. So then that even begs the question, like, if the Blue Rose is this specific division revolving around these cases, are there other elements of this in the Bureau or the government as well? It also makes me wonder, at this point, Agent Preston, is this before, during, or after she has gone through the dossier that is Mark Frost's Secret History of Twin Peaks? Because in that book, the whole book is set up where it's this dossier that was left by somebody, Major Briggs, and Gordon gives it to her to go through and kind of cull certain information for another case. From there we go to Gordon's dream. So Gordon comes in, he tells Albert and Agent Preston about his dream. So the elements of his dream are the following. So we've got Monica Bellucci, the actress, playing herself. We have Agent Cooper is there, but Gordon can't see his face. And there is Paris, and they're at a coffee shop, and Monica's friends are there. I don't know how all of that ties together in significance, but it seems to set a stage. Then Monica says to Gordon, "We are like the dreamer who dreams and then lives inside the dream." This ties directly into the Philip Jeffries visitation in the Philadelphia office that we see in Fire Walk With Me. He says, "We live inside a dream." Now, Gordon's dream continues, and he talks about remembering this visitation. And it's weird that he nor Albert remembered that this happened. These two FBI agents that are involved in the Blue Rose, and they traffic in this stuff, and they don't remember something as significant as the long-lost Philip Jeffries reappearing. Also of note in that dream is Cooper saying to Gordon,
It's 10:10 a.m. on February 16th. I was worried about today because of the dream I told you about.
So we've got a dream inside a dream, which is also what Monica Bellucci's getting at, and Philip Jeffries is getting at. So did Philip plant the seed that lay dormant until Monica Bellucci, whatever she represents from Gordon's psyche, triggers it again? And how is this? I mean, I'm assuming this is all going to help culminate this investigation. We'll see. So now we get Diane. She comes in, Deputy Diane, and we get a bomb. So they tell her about the ring with the inscription. It was found in Major Briggs's stomach. And she has this epiphany because I don't think anybody saw this coming. Janie is her half-sister. Estranged half-sister, of course. Fuck you, Janie, right? And she's married to Dougie. Now, okay, this opens up a whole other thing because we know Diane is not telling them everything. I'm still standing by my idea that she is inhabited by Bob, or at least some spirit. I still say Bob. And I feel like this kind of lends credence to that because, okay, follow my logic here. The last night that Cooper saw Diane, this keeps coming up and she doesn't want to talk about it. At first we thought that it was something terrible. Now it seems like she's maybe working with him. Hence my idea that he approached her as the good Dale and then used that to get in and possibly infest her, open her up to Bob. Now, if that's the case, would together the two of them worked out this thing where they manufacture another Cooper and then use her half-sister to maintain him? So in other words, we don't know the exact mechanics of the doppelganger and the host and the construct, as Mike called Dougie. Well, I believe he said he was manufactured, but let's use the word construct. So we have three different kinds of one person, one entity, right? The arm tells Cooper in the second episode that he can't leave the Red Room because he has to wait for his doppelganger to return. But is it because both the doppelganger and the host can't be outside the Red Room or the lodge at the same time? Or is it because there's already another one of them out there? So in other words, if you look back at the Lois Duffy case, it seems there's two on the same plane at the same time. So that kind of eliminates the idea that Cooper couldn't get out just because the doppelganger was there. So either Lois Duffy shot and killed her doppelganger, or Lois Duffy shot and killed a construct manufactured to prevent her from getting out. So with Cooper, if Bad Coop does not want to have to face off with Good Coop again, knowing he can get out, he makes this construct, Dougie, uses Diane to get him in with her sister where he can keep an eye on him, and then that prevents Cooper from getting out. However, of course, Cooper does get out and Dougie becomes no more. This is all goes down to this idea, it continues to trouble us. Like, what are the exact mechanics? We're never going to get them, but it's just fun as hell to pick this stuff apart, right? I like the directness of this episode. And so what I mean by that is, so Chad's arrested, he's taken out of the picture, and then we see Sheriff Truman, Bobby, Hawk, Andy preparing to go on this trek into the woods to the coordinates that Major Briggs left. And then the next scene, they go. That wasn't the kind of thing that was happening 3-4 episodes ago. So it's speeding up. Can you feel it? Because I certainly can, and it's great. These guys go, they park, they go into the woods. There's a great shot of the four of them walking shoulder to shoulder, and it mirrors very much, it reminds me of the shot post Leland's confession and death. We had Albert, Truman, Hawk, and Cooper walking like this down a path, and it was a very significant shot, and I feel like this is purposely evoking that. So something's going to happen, right? So they find Jack Rabbit's palace, and it's this large stump. Now, incidentally, the Twin Peaks Fest Facebook group, there's been a lot of pictures since last night's episode put up because a lot of people went into the woods and found this exact spot, took pictures of it thinking it was cool, and then it shows up in this episode. I thought that was wonderful. I digress. They go to Jack Rabbit's palace, they put the dirt in their pockets, and I'm thinking this stump, this thing, looks like, in a way, the Experiment or the Mother of Abominations. It almost looks like it has horns. That might just be me reading into it, but whatever. They put soil in their pocket, and then they go 253 meters due east to find these coordinates. And take note, then they also are there at 2:53 p.m., right? So that's an interesting juxtaposition, almost as if, we have all these incidents of duality in Twin Peaks, and this is another one. So it's almost like time and space. Like, are they the doppelganger of one another? Time, space, how does it go? I don't know. I might be reading too far into that, but they come across... Now, I don't know exactly how to pronounce this character's name, but it's the eyeless girl from episode 3. Naido, I'll just call her. Naido. Interesting. I wondered if she had some kind of a juxtaposition to Senorita Dido. I couldn't find anything online about mythology concerning this character that wasn't linked to Twin Peaks at this point, so I don't know. They find her naked, laying in this billowing smoke, and then a vortex opens up at exactly 2:53. They stare into it. Andy is pulled into the vortex, and he winds up in this place. Previously, I said it was the White Lodge. I'll just stay with that. I don't know if that's what it is, but we'll stay with that. And he meets the giant, aka question mark man, who now identifies himself as the fireman. Now, this is interesting because I'm guessing here that the fireman is the one that regulates and monitors fire. So on Hawk's map, we have this primordial archetype of fire, and depending on the intention, it can either be good fire or black fire, bad fire. So if the fireman is the one that monitors this and regulates it, that also adds credence to this idea I kind of proposed after 8, that what we see when we see the fireman watching the screen in episode 8, and he sees the bomb go off and he sees the experiment vomiting all of this stuff, it appears like he tries to offset it, to tip the scales back. So it's as if the fire is burning black and he's trying to push it back the other way. So not necessarily good, but just rebalance, right? It's out of whack. So something appears in Andy's hands. I don't know what it is. It lets off some smoke, and then he looks up and there's these circular skylights. I had the impression before he's taken away, when they find NATO, there's circular stump with this yellow, like gelatinous mold in it. It reminds me a lot of Glastonbury Grove, right? The rock formation with the black engine oil. So I don't know if this is kind of another incident of duality, like this is the counterpoint to that, which would then lead that this is possibly the White Lodge, because it's the counterpoint to where Glastonbury Grove goes. So he looks up, and I'm getting the impression he's looking up through this thing that they were just looking down at. And he sees all of these images, and he becomes possessed of this information, and he doesn't act like Andy at all. He's very stoic. Now, everybody is when they seem to be in these other places, and it may just be a physiological response to it. He gets all this information, then they return him to the woods, and what we see here is time lapse of all of the, we've got Bobby and Sheriff Truman and Hawk, and there's multiples of them. It looks like the woodsman around the gas station in episode 8. And Kirsten pointed out, she's like, are these like parallel universe versions of these people? They're all coming from different places, like different directions. Truman's here, Truman's there. And then Andy returns, and he takes charge of the moment. He's carrying NATO. He says, we have to get her to safety. Some people want her dead. And then here we go again with the memory loss. Truman and Hawk don't remember what happened. So now 2 things. Now, Kirsten said, maybe it's not the same Andy that came back. He's acting differently. That's definitely a possibility. Also, I thought maybe Andy came back to a different version of his reality, and that's why they didn't remember it. They take her back to the police station. We get this scene that kind of imitates the Bobby and Mike barking at James in the very earliest episodes. Instead, it's Chad in his cell, and then NATO, and she's making these monkey noises, and then this like drunk. He's listed in the credits as drunk. Again, Kirsten pointed this out. I just did not even catch this. It's Billy. There's no doubt about it. At the end of the episode, the 2 girls talking about Billy, they mentioned the blood pouring out of his mouth, whatever. This is totally Billy. So NATO is making these monkey-like noises. And then Mr. Brown messaged me today, and he pointed out, is NATO maybe really Judy? Nobody has actually said her name. This is just a name in the credits. And we've seen this before, like with the drunk, where it can eventually be, Billy or whatever. They use these placeholders so they don't reveal who the character is, because there's a lot that has been revealed in the show just in the credits. Richard Horn, we never would have known who he was the first time he appeared, if not for the credits saying Richard Horn, right? Is she Judy? And the reason he said that is because in Fire Walk With Me, there's the scene where the mask is lifted and there's the close-up of the monkey's face, and somebody whispers Judy, and now she's making monkey noises. I will tell you this, if Sarah Palmer is not the girl that the frog roach crawled into, it's this person. So now let's go into Sarah Palmer. She is by far my favorite character right now. I'm so fascinated with this. I mentioned how she seems to have some kind of a hang up on carnivorous nature, right? And here we go. She takes a bite out of this dude at the bar. The scene was great. I absolutely loved it. Not just because it confirmed this for me, but I just thought it was handled so well. It was so bizarre. Very seedy bar. She goes to this Elks Lodge. This guy tries to pick her up. Takes a bite out of his neck. And there's this moment. So she jumps up and screams and tries to kind of distance herself from having any culpability for this, which the bartender's suspicious, right? So she screams and she acts all panicked, and then there's a moment where this is Sarah Palmer, and then all of a sudden it's not Sarah Palmer anymore. She's very measured, and she's very sure of herself, and she's calm. So that's whatever it is that's riding along with her. I don't think it's Wyndham Earle anymore. It's the Mother of Abominations. It's the experiment. So now this got me thinking, is this something that they came up with after the fact, or has this been planned all along? And I pulled out Laura Palmer's Secret Diary again. And it's been a long time since I read it. I dug through it a couple weeks ago, but I didn't read the whole thing. So I started reading from the beginning. I didn't get very far, but I'd like to read you from page 5. This is one of the earliest entries. It's dated July 23rd, 1984. Dear Diary, it is very late at night and I can't sleep. I have had nightmare after nightmare and have finally chosen to avoid sleeping altogether. I figure Maddie will be tired from a ride out here and will want to take a nap tomorrow anyway, so I can sleep then. Okay, one of the dreams was just awful. I woke up crying. I was afraid Mom would come in if she heard me, and I just want to be alone right now. And she wouldn't understand that. She always comes in and sings Waltzing Matilda to me when I can't sleep, or like tonight when I have bad dreams. It's not that I don't want to hear her sing to me. It is just that there was this strange man in my dreams singing just that song in Mom's voice, and it frightened me so much I could barely move. In the dream, I was walking through the woods out by Pearl Lakes, and there was this very strong wind, but only around me. That is the portal that we're seeing. It was hot, the wind, and about 20 feet away from me there was this man with long hair and very large calloused hands. They were very rough, and he held them out to me as he sang. His beard didn't blow in the wind because the wind was only around me. His beard. This is the woodsman, or one of them. So this goes back. I mean, this is as early as you can get, pretty much. The tips of his thumbs were black like coal, and he wiggled them around in circles as his hands got closer to me. I kept walking towards him, even though I didn't want to at all, because he frightened me so much. So, I mean, right there, this was planned, and it's amazing to see it coming to fruition. So I'm going to continue to go through this. Anybody else that has any insight from this, please leave in the comments, but I think there'll be more here. Okay, so if the experiment is inhabiting Sarah Palmer, again, follow my logic. The bomb goes off. We see it in episode 8. The experiment, maybe the walls between the worlds weaken. The experiment unleashes this vomit, these eggs, these things into our world, and first manifests herself as this frog roach, which then crawls into this girl's mouth, who I'm still saying is Sarah Palmer. So she's been in Sarah Palmer all along. Now, how does that factor into what we saw in the first 2 seasons? Well, my theory right now is that Sarah Palmer, or the mother, as we'll call her, went looking for one of her other children. She found Leland Palmer, who was inhabited by her child Bob, and she joined with him in union in order to propagate and bring forth another more perfect organism for their agenda. Call it evil, just as, a very baseline, rudimentary word, but it works, right? Only Laura, who evil and evil begat evil, right? But Laura refuses it, and she chooses to die instead of become what she's supposed to become. Laura's the one. Now, this is maybe reaching, but I don't really think so, because I've been a little bit uncomfortable with the idea that Laura Palmer is this, Laura's the one. She's this bigger archetypal force, and not just some high school girl that got swallowed by this terrible supernatural whatever. And so this is actually, I like this. Like, this is making me okay with that idea, because I was really not ready to face that. I didn't want Laura to become, not like a superhero, but this larger than life thing. But this makes sense. I like this a lot. And I'm telling you, Sarah Palmer's, that's definitely who's inside of her. Okay, so from there, we're going to go to the loading docks of the Great Northern, and we've got Jimmy, James Hurley, and Freddie Sykes, right? So we saw Freddie with his green glove in, I think it was the first episode with James in the Roadhouse, wondering, in the back of my mind who the guy with the glove was. So we get this whole story, and again, here's another example of the directness of this episode. We get Andy's experience with the fireman, and then we get this guy relating his experience with the fireman, which is very similar. I love that. he talks about getting this glove, getting this power, and it's almost like they made this bizarre, like if David Lynch was going to do a superhero, this is the guy. He puts on a gardening glove and he's got, pile drive. I love it. I'm thinking we just saw Bad Coop exhibit a massive amount of strength in the last episode. What is going to be able to counter that? Well, Freddy says the fireman told him to go to Twin Peaks because that's where his destiny was. So I'm thinking that these two are going to come to blows. We'll see. James goes to check on the furnace. Now, the furnace room at the Great Northern looks like Freddy Krueger should be walking around and they're scraping his nails on the walls. Notice, what do you hear? The sound that Ben and Beverly have been obsessing about upstairs in the Great Northern, it's emanating from this exact place, from the furnace. And I think James is about to find it, and I love that they stopped it there. I'm dying to know. It's the gotta see for the next episode or one of the next episodes. Finally, I just want to say, I'm a fan of several of the musical acts that they have had on the show. And some of them I didn't know, but I took to right away. I thought Lissy just blew it out of the water. My favorite performance so far of the series. I loved it. We've got 4 episodes left and 3 weeks, because those last 2 air, I guess, September 3rd back to back. And it's really ramping up, and I think 15 is just going to be insane. So I'll see you back here in a week. And, some of you asked for longer episodes, so there you go. Going to be a lot to talk about in the next couple weeks. So, all right, see you in the trees.